Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My sincerest apologies for this video being quite late on a Tuesday and the fact that there was no video on a Sunday. This cable decided to break. However, I do think now the mic quality is slightly more improved, so I know that'll be music to a lot of your ears. Today, we'll be looking at my best Game Week 6 wildcard, and on top of that, a reflection of my team's performance in Game Week 5, my strategic thoughts on them, and some interesting player insights, because I thought there were quite a few that we could deduce from the weekend. If you could please consider subscribing. Up to 70% of you who watch regularly haven't done so, and it would mean a lot. The support on the channel was fantastic last week. Even the support before I made these videos have been great. So I really would appreciate it, and thank you so much. There is some really interesting discussion to be had on both strategy and player selection, and just general matchups and a variety of other subjects. So I'm really looking forward to it. Again, please do consider subscribing. But for now, let's get into it. But before we do, I'm going to have a very similar conversation, the one that I had in the Wildcard 4 video, where I discussed why I don't really like wildcarding in general compared to, I guess, the volume at which it's being done, and my thoughts around the whole strategy. We're going to start with the actual team itself. Now, this is the best Wildcard 6 team, in my opinion, right? And everyone's will be different, and naturally so, and that's good for the game. But when I look at what I deem to be the best Wildcard team, I don't actually find it that impressive. I think it misses a couple key elements, and I also think there's a certain lack of flexibility within the desired structure. And as a result, I'm not a huge fan. I also think the upside that you're trying to capture is fairly minimal for a wildcard. I think, okay, outside of Arsenal, which you should be able to get to anyway, like at least two of them, especially if you don't have any, you should really have been rolling free transfers to an extent. You have routes from Salah, which we're going to touch on, especially tomorrow. And outside of that, where does the upside lie? Antoine Semenyo, I really like him as an option. I think Iraola has done a fantastic job coaching that attack. The defense could be improved, but the attack, really good job there. So I like that. But outside of that, is there much upside? Is Brian Mbeumo even that good of a pick? We're going to go on to that when we talk about all the assets. I would, however, just encourage you to at least consider if you could fade it. I think maybe even wildcard 8 is not a bad strategy. If you were looking to, bring in a couple of Arsenal assets, enjoy the upside there, and then in wildcard 8, get rid of all of them and go super hard on like Spurs and Man United as an example, right? Like United's defense certainly looks like it has some upside to it, just as an example. Or could you hold it for 12 where the fixture swings are even bigger, and that's where I think there's the most upside to capture. Wildcard 6 just don't seem so different to the teams that you already have, and where they do, you're losing players like Trent or a Salah. And I'm just not sure that this is the best usage of it, especially so early on in the season. But I really would consider it. Of course, if it's the best thing for your team, by all means, go ahead. Again, I am speaking very generally. I do, however, think it is being slightly overplayed. But now, let's actually get into the team. Now, you may be surprised at this selection, and you may be wondering if there's a hint of bias in it because Sels has performed well for me so far. I assure you, there isn't. This is purely an objective selection. So why have I gone Sels over Flecken or maybe even Raya? Because those are the two I would say that are the biggest. Okay. So a spoiler alert, Raya isn't in the team, and my triple Arsenal doesn't include him. I do not think that it is the best selection for Wildcard 6 when looking to optimize Arsenal specifically over Game Week 6 and 7. I think the upside hugely lies with the attack when you consider fixtures, right? What's Raya's ceiling in the next two games? Well, I don't think it's particularly high. They shouldn't face too large of a shot volume. And even if they can see just one goal in the next two games, that's it. He's almost capped for me at 8 points. And when you're paying 5.5 million for a goalkeeper, that is just not good enough, right? Whereas you look at the likes of Havertz, for example, his upside to the next two games is huge. It's around, I'd say, 25 points. Right? And I'm talking about the upper echelons of his ceiling. Sure, he could surpass it, but that is really unlikely. So for me, if you're looking at Rise is probably like a 13-pointer max, I would say. Havertz more like a 25. So that's the first thing why I've omitted Raya. Why have I chosen Sels over Flecken? Sure, you could argue that Flecken probably has the better set of fixtures. I'm not debating that. However, when I look at Forest defense and their structure and their manager, I look at two different things compared to the Brentford of now. The Brentford of old, I would have been far more on Flecken, right? They defend a lot deeper, and just a general approach is a lot different to what it is now. Now they're more willing to press you high. And I think the fact that they've kept no clean sheets thus far, I think the fact that they've shown some susceptibility to being played through to an extent, I cast my mind to the Crystal Palace game, right? Eze really should have had a haul there. Palace definitely should have scored more than one there, in my opinion, especially in the first half. Against Liverpool, the problems were not eradicated. Against Spurs, the problems were not eradicated. Against City, the problems were not eradicated. Okay, sure, fine. Those are all relatively difficult games, but there aren't that many easy games in the Premier League anymore, right? There are a lot of good attacking sides. West Ham have an abundance of attacking talent. Wolves are a good attacking side. Nori down one flank, Cunha in the central, Strand Larson in the middle. There's just a lot of firepower in the league now. And if their defense is going to play in a way which is certainly opens itself up to conceding, I'd say, high quality chances to an extent, being able to be played through to an extent, then I'm not sure that they're able to keep a high volume of clean sheets, or if any at all. Whereas with Forest, setting up in that deep, compact block, just think I trust Nuno's system a little bit more. And Cell's ceiling is certainly still there. You saw away at Anfield, right? They'll concede enough shots. Okay, Brighton had a lot of the ball and they didn't turn that into shots on target, but they had a lot of the ball and it was enough for them to create those shots on target. And I just think the fixtures are there for Cells to definitely generate some hauls. He plays some good attacking sides that are not great. For example, you've got West Ham and Newcastle. Good, but not great. Those are the type of fixtures where he can definitely haul. And the fixture run in general is not too bad. Even Fulham at home this week is a nice hauling prospect. I just trust their defense more, and I trust the fact that I can get at least one haul in the next 5 or 6. And I think that is going to be a little bit more difficult for Flecken given the system. When we look at this defense, we're going to have to talk a little bit more about strategy, my overall macro perspective, and one particular omission. The omission referenced is Trent Alexander-Arnold, because I've seen a lot of him in Wildcard Draft. Now, why don't I have him? Well, one, budget to an extent, but really, when you consider that this team has 1.2 million in the bank, I could have got there from Apollo, right? I could have made a small downgrade elsewhere, and I could have got him. But I have chosen actively not to. The reason I like having 1.2 million in the bank will come on to when I discuss the midfielders and forwards. But why am I okay just going without him in isolation? I don't think the fixtures are really there for a 7 million price point. I think Wolves away and Palace away, whilst very good fixtures for the attack, I really, really like them, which we're going to also come on to in the mid. I don't think they're the best defensive ones. I think Liverpool will just simply keep more clean sheets at home. I also think when you look at the role he's playing, he's still not getting into as many attacking positions. I would still just like a little bit more from Trent. Now, look, Arnie Schott's a top manager, right? I do, however, think he's limiting Trent and one of his best keys to essentially platforming side to become an even better team. And that is just to give Trent more attacking actions closer to the opposition's goal, especially in that wide right zone. And when he doesn't have that to an extent, like for example, his assist against Bournemouth is a bit of a freak assist. Like rarely is he going to be able to travel that distance in that type of fashion and release the ball to Diaz in that way, right? Usually his assists are going to come from pieces or crosses from wide areas onto the nine's heads, really good penetrative passes, etc., right? And I don't think he's platformed in a way where he's going to be doing that at the same level he has done for Klopp. And therefore, with that, in combination of the fixtures, Wolves away, Palace away, Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, I'm not in love with the next four clean sheet prospects. They really should have conceded against Bournemouth. They got incredibly lucky not to do so. Bournemouth really should have got at least one, and yeah, he nearly got an own goal. That's not really got anything to do with it. But, you know, I did think that the Hall had a little bit of luck associated with it, and I just prefer spending the money elsewhere, specifically on the midfield, and not having him. My strategy with this defense is the 3 you see on screen, set and forget, play every single week. City and Arsenal are the 2 best defenses in the league. You have the highest clean sheet probability. Now, the argument will be, Rodri's injured. What does that do for City's clean sheet likelihood, and how does that impact them? Well, it obviously reduces it, and it obviously makes clean sheets harder to come by. However, this is still a very, very good defensive unit. And not only that, you saw with Kovacic playing in Rodri's absence earlier, he is a very good understudy. He's not of the quality of Rodri, but he's a very good understudy. And I think until the schedule really starts to impact sides, they'll actually do okay in the sense that they'll be able to mitigate teams' attacking threat to a significant degree. The other thing with Gvardiol is I like his attacking prospects. When Walker plays, Gvardiol, as we saw against Arsenal, will pick up some fantastic positions. Not only just in that left half space, but he's also getting really central. He's got the ball striking to convert from those zones. He's also got the intelligence. He's got the body mechanics. He's got, like, if you see the way he takes the ball and how he can operate in those smaller spaces, it's unbelievable for a centre-back, right? I think he has all the necessary tools to generate attacking returns. And you know what? When he doesn't play in that role, at least he's going to be on the pitch. I think he's practically undroppable now, especially when you don't have Rodri. You probably want your more defensive-minded players to be slightly better on the ball to compensate for that to an extent, and he definitely has that in an abundance, and more so than any other City player. So I think when you have an expected minutes lock there, really good fixtures from 7 to 11, and attacking upside, you take it. Look, triple Arsenal. I'm not even going to speak about Saka and Gabriel much because it's genuinely pointless. They're so clear at the top of the list on this wild card. It's ridiculous. I mean, Leicester at home, Southampton at home. Gabriel is the biggest box threat in the best set piece taking team, in the best defensive team in the world. So there is no reason to admit him. If you admit him, I just think it's fundamentally a bad decision. A very, very poor decision, because there's no way you can argue anything bad against Gabriel for at least the next two. Even going down, just keeping him for the whole season, given the fact that he's the biggest box threat and given the fact that Arsenal are the best defense, you could honestly just leave him in there and then use your transfers elsewhere, which is actually something we're going to come to. Now, I could have gone for two 4.5s and rotated them. I just feel more comfortable with Porro. For those of you who will have watched my videos, you will have seen me talk about this theory that I just don't think there's going to be as many clean sheets this year as the landscape of the Premier League change, as the philosophies of the managers change, and they're more willing to play in this best pragmatic way. And as such, I think the amount of clean sheets Spurs keep to maybe other teams who are above them last year in that facet will decrease, and therefore attacking returns will become really, really important. And they're a far better way to the bonus point system. Porro's definitely primed for that. Obviously, he's got his open play threat when he's playing that right-hand side 10 role, the volume of shots, the positions he's taking up, also got some set pieces. The fixtures are actually pretty good as well. So, fixtures are pretty good compared to, I guess, most. So, for that reason, just set and forget. Now, the reason I've got Ethan Pinnock here is if I ever do need to bench one of them, if Porro's attacking output looks like it will decline, if Spurs really look like they're just going to concede every game, then I can play Pinnock, right? The fixture runs there. It covers me very nicely for any injuries. Greaves is there because he's probably the best 4.0. But it's looking for me like that 3, set and forget. You always give yourself a decent amount of attacking upside. Try and capture those big hauls because they will offset a couple of clean sheets from somewhere else. And then Pinnock's just there as a backup, a good backup, because he's good in the opposition's box as well. And he's got the fixtures to complement that. Right, now this whole midfield discussion is what I think is the really, really interesting part about Wildcard 6, and where the main focus of strategy, macro level perspectives, even micro level perspectives in terms of which player to pick, and the focus really should be. And there is a lot to discuss here, apart from Bukayo Saka, because that man, when you have Leicester at home, Southampton at home, and he's fit, and he has penalties, and he has minutes, is just an absolute lock, right? I cannot see any reason why you would go out. However, the other 4, and a more macro level perspective on the whole category, I think is really, really important. I've seen quite a few tweets where people are like, oh, I'm not particularly encouraged by the amount of midfield. There don't seem to be many standout ones, and I agree. I don't think there are many good ones. I do think for the next 2 weeks, there is one person who could arguably be better than Saka, and that actually is Mohamed Salah. We're going to touch on him in depth tomorrow because I have a new theory about him away from home and his prospects. And one of my big issues with Wildcard 6 is he doesn't have Salah for Wolves away, Palace away, which I think could be really good. And in his place, you just bolstered the defense a bit and got Bryan Mbeumo. That's how I really see it in a lot of cases. Obviously, like there are certain teams where you have no Arsenal, no roots to Arsenal, so you've got additional Arsenal assets in for 2 weeks. However, apart from that, that's what I would say the compensation and the swap is for. So that's my, I guess, first issue with the midfield. The other thing is going back to the point originally. There aren't that many standout options. So if you do get it wrong and it doesn't go particularly well, I just feel you're locked into a very difficult position, because where's the flexibility? How do you get from Rodgers, Mbeumo, Bowen, Semenyo to another mid, which is a premium, like Salah, if you really need to get him back, like Palmer? Now, yeah, you could say there's 1.2 in the bank, but what if we need to upgrade maybe the cheaper forward? I just think there's a lot of potential problems. So the counter argument I've seen to offset that is that people will pick Cole Palmer alongside the rest. However, I do think then you have to make too many compensations within your defense, or you have to fade Havertz and go for Raya instead. And those, I just don't really, really like it. I prefer just the structure of Salah and Saka and going for a pretty cheap defense. But on Wildcard 6, it's very difficult to justify a cheap defense when the fixtures aren't as good for the smaller teams, quote unquote, and Gvardiol and Porro and even Trent to an extent have good prospects. I just find that every route has somewhat significant problems, in my opinion. But that's enough downing Wildcard 6 and the midfield makeup. Let's go on to the players now. Brian Mbeumo, as an asset, should be very, very, very good. I mean, the fixtures are really that. I really like them. The only thing I wonder about is, do West Ham take a lot of notice of what's gone on so far? I put a tweet out in Game Week 1 after their game or during the game against Villa, and I was like, you cannot use this type of midfield in the Premier League, this midfield setup. It's going to get run over, and you're going to get played through so much. And it has happened again and again and again and again. And if they do it against Brentford, to be fair, Brentford are one of the worst sides to exploit it. Just given the makeup of their side, it's not negative, it's just how they are. But someone else is going to do it to them. So I do wonder if they'll set up in a slightly different way and they finally learnt their lesson after Chelsea slapped them and easily could have had a few more goals. Apart from that little variable, the fixtures after that are really, really solid. 3 in the next 4 are at home for Mbeumo. The only negative, given he's got all the fundamentals nailed down, given that he is a talisman, is that how does this side function without Visser? Is it going to be as good? Because obviously at Spurs, you saw what I would call his big game structure when he uses Lewis Potter in that really wide area. But I think he'll change it against West Ham. I don't think he'll show them the same type of respect. So then does Mbeumo play in the middle as part of a 2? Probably not. He probably plays on the right wing. And how does that work? And how is he going to be without Visser, etc., right? I wouldn't mind having one game just to see it. But all in all, a very solid pick. I don't need to speak about Rodgers too much. I mean, 5.1 for a guy who's playing in this hybrid 10 role where he very occasionally runs off the 9, but mainly occupies those 10-like positions. Not too much fluidity, so he's always in good proximity to the box. I mean, Emery really likes him. The minutes are there, the fixtures are there, etc., right? So that's really solid. The one player I think I love so much about Wildcard 6, and the one strategy I like quite a lot, is Bournemouth. I actually did think of giving you Tavernier as well as Semenyo and really going for it in the next 2 weeks. Someone actually commented this a few weeks ago, and all I wanted to say is you, my friend, are a visionary. But yeah, I am so impressed with how Iraola has coached their attack in terms of just the way it's functioning going forward, but mainly the press. I think they've won so many balls as a result of it, so many situations and chances indirectly as a result of it, and I can just expect them to do that more and more, especially at home against Southampton. Now, Southampton are someone who likes to play out the back. If you do that against Bournemouth at their place, I think you're going to struggle. I think everyone is going to struggle against Bournemouth's press away from home to an extent. So, yeah, I think Semenyo's look the sharpest of the attackers. And if you did fancy a Tavernier Semenyo double up to really go for the upside and maybe like drop a Bowen or a Mbeumo, by all means go ahead. I definitely see some upside to it now, more so than I did in the future. But yeah, I really, really like him on Wildcard 6. I think if you're going to do it, take the upside that's there with it. Finally, we have Bowen, and we're going to go back to a bit of strategy. I think when I've selected a defense like this, which should never really need to be touched for the foreseeable future, we can use our transfers solely on optimizing this midfield and forward line. In a structure which doesn't have 3 premiums, where it's just Saka and Haaland, because Haaland's obviously going to be here, I think making sure that your mid-price mids always have the best fixtures possible is really, really important, because they're nowhere near as fixture-proof as the likes of Palmer and Salah. I really think that's such an important point, okay? Optimizing your mid-price mids is far more important than the premiums, because the premiums are the premiums because they can do it in pretty much any game, and they just have higher ceilings. So, for example, Semenyo, okay, great, but what happens when he has Arsenal, City, Villa? Okay, now it's probably time to move him on. Maybe even Mbeumo, he's a little bit slow. Okay, let's say Eze has a great fixture. Let's move on to him. That's just an example, and it's not one that's particularly realistic with the fixture run, but you know what I mean. The reason I've chosen Bowen is because I don't think he actually fits into that category ever, really. And he can actually be one of the ones who's a little bit safer. I mean, playing up top, he's a talisman of their team. Sure, he doesn't have penalties, but 90 minutes, really sharp finisher. The fixtures are definitely improving. Game week 7 is a differential. It's one to target, and I like that about this side. You can bench the likes of Rodgers, for example. Not the best fixture for Rodgers. Not the worst either, but I think it makes sense to bench Rodgers there. Most people have to play Rodgers. Gives you a lot of upside. Okay, Spurs are always exploitable. Man United's, again, not great, but after that, it's pretty good, right? And I just think having Bowen as a really secure asset in this type of makeup of this side could be very beneficial. And I just think that a haul for him is around the corner. Moving on to the forward line, lastly, for the wildcard team. I'm not really going to give Haaland too much airtime. I feel it quite unnecessary because it's going to be a lock in pretty much everyone's team. So good for him. Havertz, look, I spoke about it earlier, right? Why I'm not choosing Raya. The reason I'm choosing Havertz is, well, you can't use the Spurs and City performance as a reflection of what he's going to be like against Leicester and Southampton. The roles were completely different. He was literally playing right centre mid in a 6-3-0 for half the game against City. The other 35 minutes of the first half, City dominated. Against Spurs, they were riceless, which I think really hurt their transitional threat, just general game. So there are so many reasons why it was very difficult to judge Havertz of those. In the first half against Brighton, he certainly looked like he could score. Against Wolves, he certainly was really involved. And those are the better games to judge him off. Sure, Odegaard is out, but Odegaard being out and the improvement of the fixture quality, well, I actually don't think they equal each other. I think the fixture quality improving by that much, with the greatest respect to the promoted side, I think is more important. So where there is upside in the next 2 weeks that Raya doesn't have, I would definitely go for him. The last spot is DCL. This can be your Chris Woods. This can be your João Pedro's. I just think with the fixture on being that good for such a prolonged period of time, 90 minutes, all the fundamentals nailed down, penalties, and I'm just expecting Everton to get better and better as their whole structure and defense improves. And I think that will just facilitate McNeil doing a bit more in attack. He's done very well so far, but it'll just give him a better platform to do so. I think like at 5-9, it's difficult to go too wrong with DCL, especially when the next two are at home. Let the next two and Ipswich away go, and if it fails, then okay, so be it. But I cannot see him walking out of those 3 games with at least 1 return, but naturally hoping for a lot more. So he's my pick of the bunch. I really like Chris Wood as a close second for the cheap options. João Pedro I'll probably fade. I mean, injury worries, fixtures are kind of tough, so I would go DCL, but if not, then Chris Wood. That wraps it up. Again, I'm not particularly bullish on it, and you may have actually sensed that throughout the video, but I do think that this is what I would call the best of a bad bunch. And at least you have triple Arsenal there, right? At least you have Semenyo. You have short-term upside to an extent. Right, now onto my team in a review, and also some insights from the week just in general, which I think could really help because we did learn a lot in game week 5. Overall, scoring 56 points, 60 minus 4 is pretty rubbish. I usually just look at the Content Creators League and roughly find out where I'm at and how I did as a result of that. You look at it, it's pretty far down, but it's only like 10 points, which is what the hit cost me in the end, away from being quite a good score and above average. So, you know what? Whatever. I'm down 10 points on it. I'm sure, I hope I will make it back in the next 2 weeks because that's how long the hit really lasted for, game 5, 6, and 7. And then we will see how good of a move or bad of a move it was. Sells, I'm fine with. I think Brighton can dominate the ball. I kind of expected that to an extent, especially at home. The amount of fluidity they have, they'll always look somewhat dangerous, but they didn't create too many clear-cut chances, right? Both the goals conceded were arguably avoidable. I mean, one was just a very good cross, and the second was a free kick, which Roy Keane thought that was a lot better for. Apart from Welbeck generated 1 chance in the second half. There really wasn't too much that was clear-cut, hence why Sells only had 1 save. So I'm actually fine with it. The only down thing is that there's no Gibbs White for Fulham, which is definitely not a good thing for the defense, given he's an absolute workhorse. But maybe he sets up more conservatively as a result. And I'm still quite bullish on having Sells as my keeper. Not too much to be learned. Now, one thing I just realized, that rank is wrong. Because I'm actually on 360 points because there was a change to the bonus of Rodgers, who went up 1. And also ESR went down 1, which would have helped my rank as I sold him. So just something to keep a note there, 360 points. Gabriel, I mean, I absolutely love this guy. Propelled my rank in game week 4 with that bullet header, and again saved my week because he gave me the Gabriel Saka combination yet again. Like I talked about in the wildcard section. I mean, just buy him, honestly. Robinson, Fulham conceded enough chances or enough instances of attacking situations where I think it's fair enough that I lost my clean sheet. I'm really looking to just play him this week because I have to, and then benching him for the 3 weeks after, and then I'll bring him back into the side off the bench when the fixtures improve. Concert, those of you who have been watching the YouTube channel know that I was talking about this. I don't care what the statistics say. I knew that he had the instincts in the box. Every time I watched him, he was always in the right area, and he just got close to scoring. So I think I definitely deserve this. And for those of you who listened, you also deserve this. And I was very, 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 very happy with that. The defense, it was actually all right, to be fair. Like, they conceded a few chances, but they're going to with that game model. Using a clean sheet of that type of mistake is never ideal, but you know what? If he keeps popping up with goals, so be it. I'm not going to sell him because why would I? I mean, the fixture run over the next 4 is fine. They're a good side as well, so especially at his price, just keep him, and I will put other fires out and take other opportunities. In general, I'm not too happy with the defense just because Robinson doesn't have great fixtures over the next 3. I also have nothing in the bank to upgrade Lewis Hall. which is why I'll probably look to take funds out of Eze either this week or next, and then, which we'll talk about in the next session, to upgrade Lewis Hall in game week 7. Now, the Liverpool game against Bournemouth pretty much went exactly as I expected. Liverpool created an abundance of chances, and Bournemouth certainly had quite a few of them as well. I thought Liverpool were very lucky to walk away with a clean sheet, but you know what? They probably deserve that little bit of luck, especially Trent owners, considering he hasn't got an attacking return thus far. So fair enough. Unlucky to get a Salah 12-pointer only as a captain. I mean, so many instances where he could have converted a little bit better, and had he been a little bit sharper, we were easily walking away with a haul. But you know what? So be it. It's cool. His prospects still look really good. And in tomorrow's video, which I'm really, really looking forward to because I'm recording it straight after this, so the slides are already done and I know what's going to be in it. There's a lot of interesting discussions to be had, and we will have quite a lengthy one on Mohamed Salah specifically in a lot of areas, actually, not just his prospects. But Rodgers, he finally came good. I knew he would. And he finally did. I'm so happy with that. I mean, at his price, you know what? A fair amount of people still don't own him. So the climb on the ranks was actually quite nice. 10-pointer great. I imagine now he starts to kick on. He's got his first assist under the belt. When he gets to that first goal in the Premier League, great. Eze points dodging as per usual this season. He's getting in the right positions, right? So I'll probably hold him for the game against Everton. We can actually speak about it because I wasn't really going to do a transfer plan section because I don't plan on making one till Thursday at least. So I was going to just include that in my team selection. If I do make one, it'll be him to go. I obviously spoke about early in the video how much I like Semenyo. It'll free the cash for me to upgrade Lewis Hall in game week 7, where I need to improve my defense. And then in game week 8, after Semenyo's had his 2 good weeks, I think I'll go to like a Kudus or basically anyone under like 6.5 million. Maybe even be tempted by Morgan Gibbs-White purely on like a fundamentals play as a safe play. But there's a lot of cheap options, right? And one will probably present themselves as a good option. It also coincides somewhat with Smith Rowe's turn of fixtures. I think they improve in like game week 9 or 10. So I'll be selling Semenyo in 8, maybe holding Smith Rowe for like 1 or 2 weeks. There isn't the worst thing. But yeah, the 2 players that will be leaving somewhat sooner, Eze and Hall. For Eze to stay, I just don't know how I can keep him because I have nothing in the back and I need to upgrade Hall, right? So I just don't know how he can stay. Drops a Hall against Everton, then I have a really tough decision. But apart from that, I think he's going to be the one to go. He's points dodging again. I can't really do anything about it. Saka obviously got an assist in the first half. I really thought Arsenal were going to score at least one more in the second half, but he comes off as a result of Trossard's suspension, and I can't really do too much about that. But overall, the midfield, they did pretty well, I would say. I mean, only Salah, for me, really the big disappointment, as they could have done a little bit better, got 1, but you know, I actually wanted Haaland to blank, so the fact that he only came away with the 9 points after how it started is fine. Havertz and DCL a little bit annoying. I mean, I got nothing from Havertz at the game. I didn't even get like one instance where I was like, oh, maybe right towards the end, if any of you saw where Edison had to basically block a little bit of his shot when the ball went long. But apart from that, I had nothing. But you know what, so be it. It's a really nice prospect to own him for the next 2 weeks and beyond. Calvert-Lewin had 1 chance really against Leicester. 1 chance nearly fell to him from a McNeil cross, but it didn't. I knew that this was a player that I could only assess over like a 4-week span. If I can just pick up 1 haul in the next 3 weeks and maybe 1 other return, then it'll be great. But we'll see. I can't judge it too much. It's only been a week. Obviously, Salah and DCL came into the side and generated 14 points. I sold Smith Rowe and I would have got Watkins captain. So the 4 points for the hit, the 8 pointer for Smith Rowe in the end, plus the 12, that's 24. So we're down 10 points. But like I said, having Salah for next week, I think could recuperate that on its own. Now, as opposed to the usual, I actually have the slides made, but I felt like, especially now, given the timing of the game week, it's better I give you a really brief overview of my insights. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm literally just going to pull up a list of the fixtures and walk you through a few of my talking points throughout all of them. And again, it will be very brief compared to usual. West Ham, Chelsea, same thing as I discussed earlier. West Ham way too susceptible in the middle to just being played through. The defensive transitions were awful. I mean, Chelsea really exposed them in that sense. Even going forward, when you're going to play this type of system and have your attacking talent deployed like that, you've got to be so much quicker to move the Chelsea block around, and they weren't. So I thought it was a really poor game from them overall. I imagine there has to be a tweak in the system because if they continue like this, they're just going to get beat pretty bad and not generate too much. And Bowen's interview after the game wasn't exactly super happy and positive. So I do think there'll be a change there. Wolves, same story. I can't wait to own Matthias Cunha at one point. He again shows his level of quality, and even if Wolves aren't functioning too well, he's still able to generate points simply leveraging the finishing, the carrying, etc. Villa will always generate chances, right? I thought they had an off day compared to usual, and they still managed to score 3 goals. When Watkins is probably a little bit sharper, and just the midfield behind Rodgers and Watkins is a bit sharper, I think they'll score quite a few. And I really like Watkins, really, really do. Smith Rowe, again, picking up such good positions. I thought Newcastle midfield actually had a pretty poor game. I think they definitely could have been a bit more aggressive and just won a lot more duels. Like, Fulham got through them too easily for my liking, even between the lines where you found Smith Rowe stationed at the time. He shouldn't have had that much time and space. But yeah, always in the right position. Sells Pope definitely should have saved his goal, but is what it is. Overall, I think he'll definitely be a very safe option to have in the season. I do think with the fixtures becoming a bit more difficult, that's not ideal, but he could easily just be a set and forget. Isak didn't really have a sniff. Gordon so much so much better when playing on the left, and I do think that against City he will do so. I think Barnes will get dropped, Murphy right wing, give him a different structure, or give him a different personnel interacting with the structure off the ball because they'll need to against City, especially after Arsenal showed them how to play against City. So yeah, Smith Rowe looks good. A little bit of a decline, I imagine, on the fixtures, but apart from that, really solid. Southampton and Ipswich, just avoid them both, I would say. Like, there's no real need to go there. Okay, fine. If you want to go Leaf Davis, cool. Apart from that, there's too much output spread at Southampton, and I don't think Ipswich will score enough goals compared to like the other options available at those price points, and just the fact that the opportunity cost of those slots is way too high. Solanke still doesn't look as sharp as probably I would like. I know he's nursing an injury to some extent. I doubt he's 100% fit, right? So I personally would just avoid him until you get a sustained period of attacking output. Even if it's just one sharp performance, I just wait for it. Brentford didn't have too much. Mbeumo's positioning was nice, but this isn't the type of structure I expect Thomas Frank to deploy in a big game. So I think you can wait 1 week with him if you're not on a wild cards. Liverpool, we discussed. I was so impressed by United's coaching. I thought Ten Hag did a really, really good job. They generated so many chances. How they didn't score in that game was beyond me. But, you know, it happens. They'll score goals. They still have this finishing deficiency. They'll score goals. It's just whether you can nail down the person who's going to do it the most consistently and whether that spread of output essentially declines and it becomes more focused. I don't think that's going to happen. I still don't like Bruno as an option. I think he's playing far too much as a facilitator in this midfield. When you have Kobe and when you have Eriksen playing together, both of those guys are people who can do jobs up the pitch. Eriksen doesn't have a huge amount of running power in his legs anymore. I think Bruno compensates for that with his positioning slightly at times, just as a forms of protection. So I would just avoid Bruno and probably Man United attacking assets in general until you know that Rashford maybe has good expected minutes. The defense, however, I think Onana could be an interesting pick. They conceded enough chances where it's like, okay, high save potential and the clean sheet is there to an extent. So I wouldn't mind it at 5.0. Mazraoui at 4.6, probably the preferred option. Brighton, I spoke about. I mean, the City-Arsenal game was absolutely brilliant. Like a really, really good watch. In the preview tomorrow, I'll discuss what I think about the injuries and stuff because I think that deserves its own section and more time. But for now, I think that covers pretty much everything. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a slightly long one today and a lot of just talking about players again and again. The preview tomorrow, like I told you, I've done the slides and I'm going to record it now, is going to be really, really, really good. So I would strongly encourage you to watch that. Make sure you subscribe and put on notifications so you don't miss it. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I shall see you very, very soon in less than 24 hours.